So we really do, work a lot in Allegheny County, but we work all over Western PA, similar to Sustainable Pittsburgh. We are a staff of 15. We have one person that's up in Northwest PA as well. Forgot to mention that. So one of the things that we do that we're fortunate enough to be part of is the PennSF program. And before I got into that, I wanted to talk a little bit about what a guaranteed energy savings contract was, but I think we've hit on that a few times already. But how many of you have heard of guaranteed energy savings contracts before today? Okay, so only a few. Okay, so I'm gonna go through these kind of quickly, but just to get everybody back on the same page. We have been throwing around the term ESCO as well, Energy Service Company. So for example, Noresco is an ESCO. JCI, Johnson Controls, JD is here somewhere, is an ESCO. So this is kind of the wording that I'm going to be using. Another word that people might say is performance contracting. So all of these terms are kind of interchangeable. But basically, the premise of it is that your energy savings that the ESCO is promising to you will actually be measured and verified over whatever the term of the contract is to make sure that you're achieving the savings that you thought that you were going to when you entered into the contract. One of the beautiful things about this is that it's a turnkey solution, so again, gets at all the procurement issues and headaches that can happen within municipalities. So some of the pros, one of the big ones also is that the ESCO is taking on the risk. So obviously there's kind of a con side of that in that they're going to be taking a good bit of the upside as well. But there's also the nice thing here that you can be really accessing the life cycle benefits of a project because you're looking at things that are in the longer term. There's one point of contact and that there's measurement and verification rather than just doing a savings project and assuming that you're going to be saving a certain amount. So some of the cons, which I'm going to obviously address when I talk about PennSF and how that actually focuses on these specific cons. The contracts can be really complex, especially because I'm sure every municipality doesn't have an energy attorney on retainer, right? So there's complexity to it. There's some client risk associated with the measurement and verification. And then that there's typically no independent third party involved other than just the ESCO and the municipality or the customer. So in response to all of that is the PennSF program, which is a program of the Commonwealth's Treasury Department. We have Keith Welks here with us, who also will be able to answer questions, especially on the real financing nitty-gritty stuff, because that's really not my strong suit. But the basics of this program is that it's low-cost capital and technical and legal assistance for these guaranteed energy savings contracts. So in addition to the Treasury being a part of this, there's also the Foundation for Renewable Energy and Environment. The acronym there is FREE, so you might hear me say that a few times. There is legal assistance through Baird Brown, Becker Capital and Finance to help with the financing side of things, and then GBA as the liaison in Western PA, we're funded through the West Penn Power Sustainable Energy Fund. So who can participate? Obviously all of you in this room, or else it would be weird if I was talking about the program, but it's for municipalities, universities, schools, hospitals, any nonprofit, large-scale institution. Some of the key features are that the energy service companies, the ESCOs, are actually pre-qualified through the program, and I'll get a little bit into what that means. There's standardized documentation. Again, coming from working at the Sports and Exhibition Authority, I know how challenging it can be to put together an RFP and to put together contracts and to make sure that you're, dotting all of your I's and crossing all of your T's, and also that you're in compliance with the Guaranteed Energy Savings Act, the GISA Act, which allows municipalities to enter into these types of contracts. So all of that is taken care of through the program. We're looking for large-scale projects, so over 500,000 is probably less than you would like, right? Like over $1 million?
Sure.
For projects. But the other thing that's really interesting here is that there's a lot of other backstops to the program. It's not just you and the ESCO. There's also this whole team behind you with legal assistance and financial assistance. And then in addition to all of that, your friendly GBA staff person, probably me, who is running sidecar on the program as well and helping to really facilitate the utilization of this in Pennsylvania and Western PA. The preliminary audit that you do as part of this program comes at no cost. All the program costs, including the PENSEF fees, are actually paid within the issue of the bond, so there's no upfront cost for the program. One of the other key things, which I'll touch on in a bit, is about the energy escalators. So a big part, as you can imagine, of a 20-year contract, when you're trying to figure out how much money you're saving 10 years from now, you need to also know what energy is going to cost in 10 years. So you want to make sure that that number is accurate, or as accurate as it can be, because if somebody's assuming that it's going to be 3 times what energy is today, but it turns out it's only 50% more than energy is today, then all of a sudden you're going to be lopsided and you're not going to have the savings that you thought you would. So with the PENSEF program, there's actually an energy price escalator that's already been agreed to with the ESCOs through the program. So what types of projects? All the things, anything that has a utility payback. So whether that's an energy project, which I keep saying energy, but water is certainly also included. And I suppose if you're in a municipality like Mount Lebanon or somewhere where there's a stormwater component, that also would be something that could be considered here. So electrical systems, HVAC systems, renewables, water projects. And then one of the things that really is kind of the special sauce of the program is pairing these low-hanging fruit projects with deferred maintenance and things that have longer payback periods. So altogether, you end up with a payback period of 20 years or less, which is what the length of the term maxes out at. So how do you do it? The first step, again, would be to talk to us, but step one on here is that there's a non-binding letter of interest that you enter into with the program. So the basics of that is just that you have the intent to be part of the program, but again, there are no costs associated with entering into that, and there's also no legal contract as part of that. The next step would be to issue the RFP and to get responses from the pre-qualified ESCOs. Then you're going to select an ESCO that you want to work with, and they will actually do a preliminary audit of your facility for you, or your facilities, and they'll tell you, you know, here are the things that we want to do, here's the list of 10 measures or whatever that's going to add up to the 15-year payback that you asked for. And once you're okay with that and you want to proceed, you would go to the next slide, where we talk about the guaranteed savings agreement. If you decide that that preliminary audit does not suit your needs, you can stop the program right there, and there's no additional cost that you have to pay or incur. But once you enter into this guaranteed savings agreement with the ESCO, that's when you're really, that's kind of the go, no go point, and the point not of no return, but of a return where you would have to incur some costs. So once you have a guaranteed savings agreement, you will have the ESCO complete an investment grade audit, which is going to be, you know, a much sharper pencil version of the audit that they've done originally. In that investment grade audit, they also need to show 90% of the savings that they showed you in the preliminary audit. So there's no bait and switch where they said, oh, we're going to save you $100,000. Psych, we're only going to save you $25,000. So that's one of the nice backstops of the program. The ESCO will then complete all of the work and the commissioning of the projects, and then we'll continue to verify the savings over the life of the agreement. So how are the ESCOs selected? We are looking for the program is looking for things like the financial strength of the ESCO, how many projects they've completed and how successful those have been. It is a very intense vetting process, so it is not a rubber stamp. Here's the list of current participating ESCOs, so about 15 or so that are participating today. If you are working with an ESCO, or you are an ESCO that is not on this list and you're interested in participating in the program or having them sign up, that's still a thing that they can do. So if you could just want to let us know, we can point them in the direction of how to go through that process. Procurement. So under the Guaranteed Energy Savings Act, this program actually meets the requirements of that. So you can procure, instead of doing your public RFP to get an engineer for your electric system and then one to do your plumbing system, and then there's bids for all of those different projects, you can use one point of contact for all of that. And that is what makes this procurement process so simple. So the other nice thing about this is that you don't just have to select them based on cost. So you can also consider things like whether they've done projects that are similar to the ones that you want to do, some of the references there, their reputation, all of those types of things. You don't just have to go with the best cost for this RFP process. So there are basically 3 agreements that you would enter into under this program. The first one is the Guaranteed Savings Agreement, which is between you and the ESCO. The second one is the Program Agreement, which is between you, the ESCO, and the PennSEF program. Excuse me. And then the third is the Lease Agreement, which is the financing piece of it, and is between you and the issuer. Actually, Keith, if you don't mind, maybe you could talk a little bit about this part of it, about the credit part and about the Laguda Act, because I know that's more your specialty. Oh, just about the pooling of the financing and things like that.
Right, I'm happy to do that, sure. So Angelica's doing a great job of laying this out. Sort of set up what she wants to respond to. Let me just add a bit of framing. So this is a program designed to provide a trusted advisor to you guys to facilitate your doing ESCO projects. All right, this is not a competitor to an ESCO project. We're not in competition with ESCOs. This is designed to facilitate and support your using ESCOs in what may be an effective way for you. Traditional ESCO projects often involve the ESCO bringing the financing and the work as well. What PennSEF is pioneering is, to some extent, severing the financing from the actual engineering and construction activities, because there's often a cheaper way to get capital than what the ESCOs might bring. And so in an ESCO project that goes through PennSEF, we're generally looking to set up low-cost tax-exempt financing, which all of you will be eligible for. Tax-exempt financing is almost always the cheapest cash you can get. And so if you can access that to do projects, your total project costs become lower. Total project costs are lower. One of 2 things happen. Either you throw off more money, and some of which you can strip out as excess, or you can do more projects because the projects, in fact, are cheaper to you. Those are both good things, and you can choose which of those you want, or some blend of both. PennSEF keeps costs down in a variety of ways. One is the access to tax-exempt financing that I just mentioned. The other is that we try and minimize or reduce as many of the transactional costs associated with any financing transaction that you would go through, in particular tax-exempt financing transactions. So first of all, as Angelica absolutely said, a lot of, in fact, all of the documents that you would need to do a project are already in place, and you can go to the PennSEF website and find them. So the RFP that Angelica mentioned is already there, complete. All right, it's an RFP that the ESCOs that are pre-qualified have agreed to work with. That's an RFP that they can respond to and can provide you the kind of information you need to make a decision. Essentially, you need to plug in utility spend and whatever conversation you end up having with us and with any ESCOs you might want to talk to in advance about what your scope is. You plug the scope in, and you then have an RFP ready to go. The second document that's ready to go is actually the Guaranteed Energy Savings Agreement that you would sign when you've made your final selection. And we're working at any given time with a number of different possible projects around the state. And they may include water treatment plants, they may include lighting projects, they may include HVAC and building envelope projects, but each one is whatever that particular participant is looking forward to. We then hope to manage those so that groups of projects arrive needing financing, ready for financing, shovel ready, I guess sometimes as it's called, at about the same time. When we do that, we then bring together not just your project for $2 million, and not just his project for $5 million or her project for $6 million, but a bunch of projects, the total of which is $15 or $20 million. Since all the projects have the same contract and the same underlying procurement process, we can do just one set of bond documents. So there's just one bond counsel, there's just one bond underwriter, and the transactional costs that you might have picked up entirely on your part for $5 million are now spread out over $15 or $20 million. Even though we're doing that, and you get all the benefit of that, the bonds are issued in individual series. You're only taking out the debt you need for your project. All right. So you may have noticed on one of Angelica's early slides a reference to no cross collateralization. What that means is you're never taking on the risk of anyone else defaulting, and no one else is taking on your risk. So even though you get the benefit of a sort of aggregated process, all of the financial benefits of that, none of the sort of negative consequences of a true composite or blended bond deal sort of face you. Another point that Angelica, I think, wanted me to make at this point is that because, let me take one step back. Angelica referenced the Pennsylvania statute, the Guaranteed Energy Savings Act. The Guaranteed Energy Savings Act, as Angelica said, was literally created to offer a process that allows ESCO projects to move forward, because ESCO projects have the same design firm and contracting firm, and they have to be done in one procurement, and lowest cost is generally not the right way to pick an ESCO project, because you may end up with different scopes from different ESCOs. It's hard to normalize and compare what the cost would be. So PennSEF was literally designed to work within the confines of GISA. One of the things that the GISA statute says is, as you enter into a contract with your ESCO, you need to build in what's called subject to appropriation provisions. Subject to appropriation provision simply says, if you as a municipality don't get an appropriation that's necessary to repay the financing for the ESCO project, you have no obligation to make that payment for that year. Okay, and the ESCOs understand that this is a common measure or provision in these kinds of contracts. But because that's in there, and in fact it's required to be in there based on the Pennsylvania statute, you're exempt from LAGUDA. So this does not count towards your local government unit debt act ceiling. So these are projects that you can do entirely independent of any LAGUDA considerations you may have. Some of you in the room may be familiar with LAGUDA, others may not, but the people who handle your financing, either your treasurers or your CFOs or your corporate counsel or municipal council, will be painfully familiar with that. And the first thing they'll say to you is, oh my God, we got a LAGUDA problem, I can't do this. You actually don't have a LAGUDA problem because you're exempt from LAGUDA so long as you're operating within GISA, and the PennSEF program is designed to make GISA and all of its provisions sort of benefit you.
Perfect. Yeah.
I know you thought you asked for only one thing and I gave you 12. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm trying to sort of wrap it together so it makes sense.
That's great.
Now I'll sit down.
So the other thing that, just to be fully transparent, is about the fees. I mean, obviously having this trusted advisor role does have a cost associated with it. These PennSEF fees are wrapped into the total project cost, but that's at least, and you'll have our slides, right, that you'll, because I realize that this is very small for you to see, but you can see that it kind of depends on what the size of the project is, how those fees are paid. And again, just letting you know that this energy price escalator table exists that's already been agreed to by the ESCOs. Then probably another, this one is pretty nerdy when you start to think about measurement and verification, but I'm going to go deep for just a second on this because it's so important. So whether you decide to use PennSEF or you're working just directly with an ESCO or you're just doing a lighting retrofit project or whatever it might be, if you really want to understand what your savings are, and I think Chris was really alluding to this in his remarks, you really have to have a strong measurement and verification plan in place. So if it's something simple like lighting, that is a much easier thing to do because you can say, okay, well, I know how long this light's on, what the wattage is that it uses, and all those types of things, and calculate your savings. But when you start talking about really holistic changes that we hope that you would undertake through a program like this, you need to start considering how to quantify those savings, and then also how to make sure that you can normalize year over year for things that you weren't anticipating, like changes in weather. Like, for example, I'm I'm deep in data right now, so I can tell you that in 2017 we had 25% less cooling days than we did in 2016, which means that people's energy use is lower, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they were performing better. So those savings, for example, would actually be free money that you would get, but on the other side of things, if it goes the other way and you're using more cooling, you want to make sure that you can really verify where those savings are coming from. So there is an international protocol for how to do this, and the PennSEF program will help you work through what that plan should look like. The other thing about this, which I semi-alluded to on the panel, was that if there are additional savings related to maintenance costs or labor or things like that, those are not factored into your payback period. So those are just bonus savings. And then finally, I should mention that If for some reason you're not meeting the energy savings that you were supposed to meet, there will be different remedies that you and the ESCO would have to go through. So of course they would first try to remedy the situation. So whether that's installation of new equipment or changes in some type of operations, things like that. But in the end, if you can't come to an agreement, they would actually have to pay you to cover that cost that you aren't, the operational savings that you weren't getting back from the contract. So in terms of timeline, as you know, all of these processes do take time, but just want to give you a general sense about like the total time from yes, you want to sign a letter of intent to actually construction, which is really, can be anywhere between 7 and 10 months. Of course, a lot of this depends on your internal review process and how long taking decisions or making these types of decisions really will take. And then finally, just an example of one project that has actually used this program is an LED street lighting project in the eastern side of the state. So there were 35 municipalities that went together to do this project and saved more than 40 to 60, or between 40 and 60% in their annual energy use. And then I know Keith has a number of other projects that are in different phases within the program. And of course, we don't want the eastern side of the state to be the only people using this program. So I see a lot of opportunity for not just projects that you all have here from the municipalities that you represent, but other municipalities and other large-scale institutions, hospitals, all those types of things, so we can, as a region, improve performance more comprehensively.